There's a profound transfer of power happening right now, but it's not happening in a legislature or a courtroom. It's happening silently, inside the servers of just a handful of technology companies. In this explainer, we're going to examine how the very nature of law and free speech is being reshaped as human judgment gets replaced by automated enforcement. See, code is becoming the new form of law, and frankly, its implications for our democracy are staggering. So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the core problem, how code has basically become the new judge. Then, we'll explore a concept called techno-feudalism to really get our heads around the new power dynamics online. After that, we'll dive into how platform design is degrading public discourse before we pivot to some concrete, actionable solutions for lawmakers. And we'll wrap up by framing the huge task ahead of us as nothing less than writing a new digital constitution. All right, so let's start with the main issue. We're witnessing this silent but massive delegation of what has always been judicial power. We're literally moving from a system of public courts and established legal precedent to one that's governed by private, automated, and, let's be honest, often totally opaque corporate systems. Think about it. The courtroom, for all its flaws, is built on deliberation, on human nuance, on due process. The algorithm? Well, it's the polar opposite. It's instantaneous and automated. And what's really crucial here is that it inverts a core principle of our legal system. The presumption of innocence gets thrown out the window, replaced by a presumption of guilt. Your content is removed first, and only then, maybe, you get to appeal. This whole process has a name. Legal scholars call it algorithmic adjudication. It's corporations using code to enforce their rules. But here's the catch. These automated systems, they just can't replicate the complex, subjective analysis a judge performs when thinking about something like fair use. They're blunt instruments. They're completely incapable of understanding context or parody or critique, all things that are absolutely central to free expression. This quote from legal scholar Julie Cohen just nails the breakdown of corporate governance. The traditional deal was simple. As a company got bigger and more powerful, it was subjected to more public scrutiny and accountability. But as she points out, that bargain is broken. Things like dual-class shares, which give founders way more voting power, insulate them from accountability to their shareholders, let alone to the public. And this shift leads to what scholar Katrina Geddes calls three perverse outcomes. First, you get the suppression of totally legitimate speech, especially content that should be protected under fair use. Second, there's that transfer of judicial power from our public courts to private corporations. And third, and this is a big one, is the systemic exploitation of the value that we, the users, creates online. And it's really this last point that perfectly sets up our next section. So to really understand the economics of this new world, we're going to need a new vocabulary. The concept of techno-feudalism gives us a powerful and, kind of unsettling framework for getting a handle on the new digital power structure that's popped up. So what is it? Well, in essence, techno-feudalism describes a world where a few platform owners are the modern-day lords. They own the digital land, the social networks, the app stores, the cloud infrastructure. And the rest of us, from individuals to small businesses, we're kind of like serfs. We're dependent on their platforms for our social lives, for our economic survival, and we're just forced to live by whatever rules they set. Let's break that down a bit. The new lords have absolute control. A single tweak to an algorithm can literally destroy a business overnight. Our data, that becomes the new fiefdom, something that's just extracted from us to generate incredible wealth for the platform owners. And because of these powerful network effects, where a service just gets more valuable the more people use it, any meaningful competition is, it's pretty much impossible. This brings us to this idea of digital sharecropping, which Nicholas Carr captures perfectly with this quote. We, the users, we're doing all the labor. We create the posts, the videos, the memes. We operate in an attention economy, and our reward is likes and shares. Meanwhile, the platform owners, the overseers, they're operating in a cash economy, reaping all the financial rewards from our free work. And this is not abstract. I mean, think about the Harlem Shake meme. People poured millions of hours of creative fan labor into making those videos. Most of them were textbook examples of transformative works that absolutely should have been protected by fair use. But what happened? YouTube's automated content ID system swept in, and the record label was able to claim and monetize all of it to the tune of an estimated $4.5 million, all from other people's creativity. Now, the consequences of this architecture aren't just economic. The very design of these platforms, which are optimized for engagement above all else, now poses a direct and serious threat to the health of our democratic discourse. Over 200 years ago, James Madison, one of the key architects of American democracy, warned about the danger of faction. He was worried about political tribes becoming so inflamed with mutual animosity that they'd tear the whole republic apart. He actually thought the sheer size of the country would prevent this. He could never, ever have imagined a machine capable of spreading that general conflagration across the entire globe in seconds. Well, that machine is social media. And this machine, it wasn't built in a day. It was assembled piece by piece, through what seemed like minor design choices. Back in 2009, the like and retweet buttons turned conversation into a public performance and made it effortless to spread content. Then in 2012, the share button supercharged this on our phones. And by 2013, the art of emotional headline testing was perfected, basically guaranteeing that the most outrageous stuff would travel the furthest, the fastest. And the danger of these tools wasn't lost on the people who made them. Chris Wetherell, one of the engineers behind Twitter's retweet button, later looked back on his creation with this really chilling admission. He understood that he'd put a powerful and dangerous tool into the hands of millions of people with absolutely no instructions and no safety catch. And the data backs all of this up. A Pew Research study found that posts expressing indignant disagreement got nearly double the engagement of other content. It's simple, really. In the attention economy, outrage is just the most profitable commodity there is. This economic incentive drives a very specific kind of behavior, which we call moral grandstanding. It's using public platforms not for real dialogue, but to perform your virtue for an audience. And in this digital arena, nuance and truth, they're always the first casualties in that constant competition for status. Okay, so we've diagnosed the problem, we've looked at the consequences, now we need to pivot to solutions. And these are not some vague ideals. These are actionable policy interventions that lawmakers and regulators can, and I'd argue should, be considering right now to actually rewire this system. First off, we can intervene at the level of the platform architecture itself. We can add what's called digital friction, little roadblocks that make us pause and think. A simple prompt that asks, "Are you sure you want to share this?" has been proven to reduce toxic behavior. We could also implement demetrification. That means hiding the public scoreboards of likes and shares to cut down on the incentives for all that moral grandstanding we just talked about. Second, we have to get serious about accountability. Think about mandatory identity verification, but just for creating an account. This isn't about ending anonymous speech. It's about combating the armies of bots and trolls run by bad actors. Then we need to mandate independent algorithmic audits to bring some real transparency to the systems that are shaping our entire public discourse. And finally, we absolutely have to modernize antitrust law to challenge the exclusionary designs and data monopolies that kill any real competition. Which brings us to our conclusion. Look, the task ahead of us isn't just about regulating a new industry. It is, in effect, about writing the new rules of the road for our digital public square. This is a mandate for legislative action on a constitutional scale. So, what does that look like in practice? It means drafting new laws that clearly reaffirm and protect fair use from these automated systems. It means creating regulatory bodies that have real teeth, that are capable of providing meaningful oversight of these private governments. And it means establishing clear liability, holding platforms accountable when their engagement-maximizing algorithms predictably cause systemic harm. This quote from Katrina Geddes just crystallizes what's at stake here. Online platforms are, in effect, our new lawmakers. That's it. They're setting the rules for speech, for commerce, for social interaction. They are performing a function that is essentially legislative, but they're doing it with none of the transparency, accountability, or democratic legitimacy that we would demand from an actual government. Which really leaves us with this final critical question. If the architecture of these platforms is the new law, a de facto constitution for our digital lives, then who should get to write it? A handful of unaccountable executives in Silicon Valley? Or should it be us, the public, through our democratic institutions? I mean, the answer to that question will define the future of free speech and democracy itself.